Harnett County native Ernest Gilchrist grew up with an interest in journalism and basketball, and his passions led him to Campbell College in 1976. The multicultural relationships he developed as a youth influenced him as he matured, played college basketball, and went on to earn undergraduate and master's degrees in business. Over the last 4.5 decades, Ernie G, as he's still known to friends and teammates, has worked in numerous management and consulting roles and traveled extensively. He's also the author of Fusion of Cultures and a contributor to the PBS documentary Voices Over the Water, which explores Scottish immigration in the United States. Yes, you can get there from here, and Ernest Gilchrist is proof of that. My name is Stan Cole, class of 1987, and this is our next installment of Tales from the Creek, where we visit with the people who've made this place special over the years. I'm delighted to be joined today by Ernest Gilchrist. Welcome to Tales from the Creek, Ernie G, and thanks for taking the time to visit with us.
Thank you.
Ernie, I'd just like to start at the beginning. Tell us how this all got started. Tell us a little bit about growing up in Harnett County in the 60s and 70s.
Yes, I just want to first, before we start, Stan, I wanted to say thank you very much for this opportunity to just chat with you today, and also to Campbell University. And I feel blessed to have attended Campbell. And but yes, I grew up in Western Harnett and the township of Johnsonville Township, probably about 30 miles east of here. And I didn't really have, if you know Harnett County, you don't have a real connection between that part of the county and this part of the county, because it's like the Cape Fear River, as if it metaphorically and geographically it cuts the county off. So a lot of people might not know people over there, and vice versa. But because of basketball, participating in basketball, I came to Campbell often because the basketball tournaments were played here, high school basketball tournaments for Harnett County schools. So we played here, and we were quite successful here. And so Campbell began to have a fond place, and it's like a second home. But growing up in Harnett County was very interesting. There's a lot I didn't really know and understand until I got older and began to reflect about the history. I grew up in an area where around a lot of people who are descendants of Scottish Highlanders. I didn't really think about it much growing up, about the McNeils and the McDougals and all the Scottish names. And what was lacking, though, was I wanted to know more. Okay, I wanted to know more about the relationship between the Scottish Highlanders. How did they get here? Why did they speak a funny language people didn't understand? And then two, what did many of my ancestors, and I have ancestors on both sides, African American as well as Scottish, and I found that out the other day, ancestor that goes back to the 1600s. But I wanted to find out more about the connection, and of course, Native Americans that live in this area. So I was very, very curious, and my home church is Johnsonville A.M.E. Zion Church, and it was established about 1867 or 8 after the Civil War. I grew up there, and some of the curiosities that I had growing up as a kid was, why did on Easter Sunday for sunrise services, why did Cameron Hill Presbyterian Church, which is a historic church where the Scottish heroine Flora MacDonald, who's very, very famous in Scottish lore and in Scottish history, why did they fellowship with our church, which was a predominantly black church, and then with another black church, and then another church, a predominantly white church? It was a Baptist church, and we're all about 4 or 5 miles from each other in the community. We all knew each other, went to school together, worked together in the summers in tobacco and stuff, but we worshiped together that time of year. And I would soon find out that was historical. It was a nod to the past when in the pre-slavery era, the um, Scottish Highlanders, when they worshiped, they would worship with their enslaved population. They would either be in the church or in the balcony, whatever, but they worshiped together. And even though after the Civil War is over, then many of the black churches started their own churches, then they continued that tradition once a year of coming together, and they still do that today in 2024. So that was one thing.
Ernie, where did you think you got your curiosity? That's kind of the,
Mm,
I try to think back, 50 years to when I was 10 years old or something like that, and when I was,
mm,
you always kind of like, oh, I wonder about this or I wonder about that, but
mm.
what, what, where's the origins of some of your curiosity? Because you seem to have that
Yeah,
just about you. You
yeah,
wonder why.
yes. That's just a little kid that walked around barefoot, and as a kid, you just wonder about the why. I've always been a little curious kid, probably uh, a nag to probably some adults, but I wanted to always know why because you see, there's even though there's information about this area, then there's a lot more information that I discovered that needs to be uncovered.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Paul Green, who was a who attended Buies Creek Academy, now Campbell University. Of course, he's a uh, very famous for as a playwright and so forth. Paul Green attended walked these grounds.
Mm-hmm.
But even Paul Green, as famous as he is in Harnett County, we don't talk about him as much as we should. And Paul Green was like Faulkner to me,
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. And what he did in the area of civil rights was amazing at that time, especially in that time in history, and what he had to endure in his fight to help make things right in that area. So I realized that we still didn't have a lot um, of attention to Harnett County and the Cape Fear region in this area, and I wanted to also be a voice for the voiceless,
Mm-hmm.
for people whose histories are not documented in in books, but the information is there as you seek it, and the little curious things, and I began to uncover. So um, that was one of the biggest things that drove me is that the lack there was a lack of in this area of documentation. Not people hadn't, to my knowledge, a lot of people hadn't before me had gone out and documented a lot of the positive things about the people here and their history and the why. And as I began to study people like Paul Green, I mentioned him, and he's a favorite. He grew up a little, um, he was born in the late 1800s, probably about 1893 or something, and he grew up at this time and with little black playmates and in this area, and it was nothing that would shape him in his life and in his writings and so forth. If you read his writings like "Home to My Valley" and so forth, and now, but in Harnett County, you really don't have festivals and things like that honoring him. We've had one before, but you don't have that we aren't doing what we should. Um, the, um, but those things made me very curious. And when I was a freshman here at Campbell, one of the one of the biggest influences of my life, and I document this in my book, is that I just happened to have an English literature class by Dr. Shelby Stevenson, and I'm blessed to have had that class. I made an A in it, of course, but Shelby Stevenson has been very impactful in my life. He is a passport laureate of the state of North Carolina, won the Civilian Award for the state of North Carolina. He has all these accolades, but he's just a country boy from the Benson area, Paul's Hill, right? And we have a lot of similarities, even though he's decades older, because of that, the humbleness that he has, and able to take what we have grown up with, the soil, and all of that nature around us, and be able to craft it, to articulate it. And that's what I got from Dr. Stevenson, and was that, and that infected me, that impacted me. And that's one of the reasons that I had him to do the forward in my book. And I was really appreciative for that. And that has been very, very instrumental.
Ernie, I'm always interested in how somebody got to Campbell. There's certainly a lot of people from this area have attended school because of the location or whatever, but basketball played a big role in you coming here. Your academic career, of course. You touched on in invoking your love of journalism, your interest in that. You were on your high school yearbook and sports editor of the newspaper. But tell me a little bit about how it got started there. How'd you get started playing basketball? And did you have some people that you emulated your game after?
Yes. That's a very, very excellent question, Stan, and I'll just tackle it this way. The basketball and my love of journalism and writing. The basketball is that I say had, but it's my older brother, second oldest brother, Warren. We called him Pee Wee, and he passed several years ago, but he was the one who first taught me how to play basketball. And he taught me how to play basketball on in the sand, and not on a concrete court, not in a gym, but just outside with a board, from a table board attached to a pine tree. And there were roots and coming out from the pine tree onto the court, and over time the pine tree would get a little taller and all of that, and then you take that down, and then you put it on another pine tree. So that's how I got started, is outside playing with him. And he was a tough guy, and he challenged me and to be better. And he hosted a lot of the community ball players, like Thanksgiving and different things like that. They would all come, they'd play in the yard, and he would be, he was loud, boisterous, he was a jokester, and they just all had a good time. And I was a kid, I'd be watching them on the side and hoping that one day I'd be, like them. So he was a major influence in my life in terms of basketball. And then later I would have coaches like Jerry Long, who was my first basketball coach in middle school, and my high school. He was a disciplinarian, and that impacted me. And Fred Davis, who went to Campbell, and he graduated from Campbell, and he was the one who had a good relationship with Coach Roberts. And I remember like yesterday that he brought me over one afternoon during basketball camp, and Campbell had, of course, Campbell had the basketball camp, which was the largest and oldest in the country at that time. And he arranged for me to be able to play with the other college ball players. I'd already graduated, and I was considering Campbell, and Coach Roberts hadn't quite extended the scholarship yet. I played with the counselors that were from other schools, ACC schools, et cetera, and I did well. I did very well. I competed, I handled well, and I was offered the scholarship. Now, so far as journalism, I was supposed to be a journalist. I grew up wanting to be a journalist. I did poetry. I wrote. I spoke in programs at school, at church, and so forth. And that's why that's how I was supposed to go the road I was supposed to go, supposedly. But Campbell offered me a scholarship. And when Campbell offered me a scholarship, then nothing else mattered. And I didn't want to major in English because Campbell didn't have a journalism degree. And I wanted to have a journalism degree. If I'd gone to Carolina or something like that, I would have had a journalism degree. Kind of arrogant, but yes. And I majored in business administration because my teammate Carlton Thompson and we said, let's do it together. And we did. But that's how I got into business administration. But my heart was always with print journalism or in the media. That's how I saw myself.
Ernie, the time you were coming up, and the same for me, kind of right before cable TV took off and the explosion of sports on television, and literally you grew up on Tobacco Road, State, Carolina, Wake, Duke, the ACC when it didn't extend from Berkeley, California to Miami, Florida, and Boston, Massachusetts. It was nicely tucked between College Park, Maryland, and Clemson, and then Georgia Tech joined. So many of those great players came through here, and you saw them at the Campbell Basketball School and competed against them. What was that like to be in this small little community and have some of the better players in college sports, and many of them who went on to play and star professionally, uh, in that little 800-seat Carter gym?
It was, again, coming to Campbell's basketball camp and being able to meet and compete with those players. You felt like once you got off Highway 421 and came up the hill and came around to Carter Gym, you were in a bubble. Of course, this area is a beautiful area near the Cape Fear River, of course, a few miles away, and rolling hills and countryside. But you come in here, and for that period of time, you were in basketball heaven. And those people that you admired and acknowledged and you saw through your television screen, and as if they were kind of like superhuman, now you're talking to them, high-fiving them, you're playing basketball against them, or they're your teammate. People like Mark Iavaroni, like the Clyde Austin,
Glide.
Clyde Glide, and so many others. M. Carr that played at Guilford in Boston, and so forth. So I realized that my talents and my academic talents, because I had Campbell as a good school, was an excellent school, and they just don't offer scholarships to people who don't do well in school. So I realized that what I had worked hard for was being fulfilled, and which was allowing me the opportunity to be in the same room and the same court with people that came from much bigger places than I did.
Long history of basketball success at Campbell, dating back to the junior college days with Fred McCall, and then he was succeeded by Danny Roberts, who recruited and coached you. Your freshman year, your team goes all the way to the NAIA finals. The next year, you're the first team to compete in Division I basketball at Campbell. Tell us a little bit about Coach Roberts. We lost him a couple years ago. He passed, and share a little bit about your memories of him and what Coach Roberts was like.
Excuse me. I get emotional talking about Coach Roberts. if it wasn't for Coach Roberts and the grace of God, I might not be here today, because he opened up the door by extending me the scholarship, and for me accepting and to come to Campbell and to work hard and to compete and to get an education, which afforded me the livelihood and the things that I've accomplished in my life. And I'm grateful. So, but Hell's Bells. Hell's Bells. Let me there's one of his sayings. But yes, yeah, I'm sorry I got kind of emotional there, but I do. He was a great man. We learned a lot. And my special season, the 76-77 season, which I write about in my book, that was one of the great seasons of sports in Campbell sports history, not let alone basketball history. And just to, I think everyone should go back if they're fortunate to read the part B of, as you have, Stan, of the Campbell University chapter, to chronicle what it was like being in the creek at that time. And that was special. I have special relationships with the players now, and that's been over 40 years. You know, we still have text message threads and get together and have maybe take weekends and stuff like that and get together for basketball games. And we did that from time to time when Coach Roberts was living, getting together and socializing. But Coach Roberts was instrumental. He was a guy that grew up in a small town, Siler City, had those same values that I did, and but he was a family man as well, and he meant a lot to me and for others, because many of us were just small town guys just like me. Okay, at that time, you know, Campbell didn't have a lot of international players or players from other parts of the country. Most of us were probably from the South, or maybe from a few from the Northeast, you know, like the Lehmans and so forth. So we had a lot of commonality in terms of understanding the culture that we came from. But Coach Roberts was just an awesome person. And let me just say this, and I was telling a teammate the other day, Coach Roberts is very instrumental in Campbell history because he helped to transition two things. Coach Roberts came to Campbell when he followed Coach McCall. Coach McCall had integrated Campbell basketball. It was Coach Roberts' job at that moment in history to continue to facilitate that socialization and integration of Campbell's basketball team within the context of the university. Okay. So that was not easy, but it was something that he did well. All right. Second transition point was that Coach Roberts was the one that helped transition what was a successful NAIA program that he had helped to elevate to that point. Campbell went out to the NAIA I think one time prior to that, and he transitioned from NAIA to Division I at a time when Campbell was still fairly a small school. We're still growing, and we didn't have the facilities. We didn't have a lot of money, and no one wanted to come to Carter. We played in Fayetteville or Raleigh or South Johnson High School or Western or Harnett Central High School or something like that. But he was responsible for doing that, getting those schedules together as an independent, when you were like the football version of Patsy, where you go played other teams because they wouldn't come to Buick's Creek. So that was a challenging time, but he was responsible for transitioning Campbell's programs in two different things. That's how I see Coach Roberts.
an interesting comparison to those days versus these days. Ohio State just wins the NCAA football championship, and it's been reported that their name, image, and likeness collective contributed something upwards of $20 million just to the football team, to those players to purchase that that national championship, is, I guess we can use that word, purchase. Um, and I've had a number of Coach Roberts' former players and his daughter Laura tell me about how Coach Roberts used to have some of his players babysit his kids. And there's a little difference in how much money you made for babysitting and the however much money you make now for being a Big Ten starting quarterback. But for someone like Fred Whitfield, who has reached the apex of the NBA administrative career, basically, and every Whitfield, for him to call Laura little sis, and for her to think of him as a bigger brother, really speaks to family atmosphere is just not something that we throw out there. This seems to
Yes.
be it was very real.
Yes, yes. The Roberts family, it's a different time.
Mhm.
And it's like, kind of like, so to speak, as if you would say Ozzie and Harriet, Mayberry, RFD type of thing. It's versus today. We've come a long ways. Campbell has grown as a university. It's not the same university that it was when I was here, but has improved and it's better. And I leverage the brand that Campbell has, because of my degree and your degree.
Mhm.
But yes, all of Coach Roberts' family they are little brothers and sisters to us. I love them dearly. And yes, Laura, Mark, Robert, and you said I start naming names, Allison and Jeannie and so forth. It's just that they were a family. We were a family. And Miss Roberts, we love Miss Roberts.
Mhm.
She was a beautiful spirit, and she took care of us. And she was like Mama Roberts. When Coach Roberts, he had to give us that vinegar, and kind of be stern and tough with us, to make us tough, the grown men. Then we go running into Mama Roberts, and she was the one that gave us the sugar and the honey, and that psychological, or realistically that hug that we needed, because we're all still young kids,
Sure.
but we're growing and learning to be men on this campus. But that's what we got out of the Roberts family, and I know I cherish the relationship that I still have with the Roberts family and some of their spouses today.
Ernie, I'm gonna throw out a few names of some of your teammates and just get some of your thoughts on these. Sam Staggers.
Wow. Sam Staggers, I love all my teammates. I love Sam Staggers to pieces. And Sam was my suite mate in Mary Hall.
Mhm.
And Sam was one of the greatest ball players to put a uniform on at Campbell. And he was tough. He was tough on the basketball court, and he helped us become better. He was one of the reasons we won, as we did my freshman year, 1976-77. And Sam was tough. Now, because I shared a dorm suite with Sam, I got to know Sam more so
Mhm.
than most of the people did. Sam was like a teddy bear compared to the guy that was on the court that you just left at Carter at practice, okay? And we have a wonderful relationship today. We probably communicate at least once every few weeks by WhatsApp. Every now and then
Mhm.
we'll speak and so forth. And when he's been, of course, as you know, Stan, he's in Belgium right now. He's been in Belgium ever since he left Campbell years ago. And we have gotten together when he comes back in the summers. And of course, a few years ago, on a bittersweet moment, Jeff Newton and I attended his father's funeral down in Mullen, South Carolina. So that's the type of relationship that, I have with Sam.
We'll go to the next one, Jeff Newton.
P. John Jefferson Super Bowl Newton. And Jeff Super Bowl Newton, we call him Super Bowl. And in the book, I'll tell you why. But Jeff and I are still close today. And in fact, we communicate often, text, call, whatever. And we visit each other at different places. He and his wife, they've gotten with my wife and some weekends, and we've gone down to the coast and visited with he and his wife, Deb. So he taught me a lot. Jeff is a P because the letter P, because in practice we break out into small groups, and he and Carlton Thompson, who was my best friend on the team. Jeff was my next best friend. We'd get together and do shoot-arounds and free throws and stuff like that. And, we'd pair up, and you pair up with a partner. And so therefore if he walked through that room door right now, he'd say, P. And I'd say, hey, what's up, P? And goes back to Campbell, those days when we pair up with your pairing up partner. So yes, it's one of the great things that the relationships that I have here with Jeff Newton. And I'm glad you asked that question, because when I think of Campbell, I think of those relationships that I have, in particular the relationship that I have with Jeff today.
Another All-American that you played with, Don Whaley.
Don Whaley. Don Whaley was he had that wonderful smile. He was friendly, from K-Town, from Kinston, but he was tough as nails, and he was very instrumental in us being the national champion runner-ups in Kansas City that year in the NAIA National Championship. One of the best athletes I've ever seen. Of course, as you may know, Stan, he's in the Men's World Softball Hall of Fame. So he was probably a better softball player than he was a basketball player. But he was one of the 3 seniors that year that led us, Sam, Don Whaley, Don Laird, that helped lead us to the success that we achieved.
Fred Whitfield.
I smile when I talk to Fred about Fred. Fred Whitfield, I'm still very close to today. The friendship that we forged at that time, it's still very, very relevant today. I've had the opportunity to spend time with Fred in Charlotte at Hornets games. When Fred's been in Atlanta, I've spent time with him at Atlanta Hawks games. Of course, I live in the suburb of Dunwoody, Atlanta suburb of Dunwoody. So we've had the opportunity to spend time. Fred's parents, what's special about Fred is not the basketball part. A lot of us know the basketball part and the things he's achieved, but what's special about Fred was his parents and what they gave him. His parents were like surrogate parents for the whole team. They, like Jeff's parents would travel 3 hours from Beaufort to the games. Fred's parents would come to almost every game. They would come down from Greensboro. And his parents were like my parents, because my parents, unfortunately, didn't come to many of the games, but didn't matter because they were there for the whole team. And I really, really love them for that. And I always ask about his mom. Of course, his dad has already gone on to heaven. And Fred and I, we have a very good relationship. Fred was a business administration major as well. But yes, Fred Whitfield, and I'm very proud of him. And not just as what he's done in the NBA and the Charlotte Hornets, but probably as equally or more proud of what he's done with Achievements Unlimited and the continued success year in, year after year that he's done with that nonprofit organization, has taken it where he is. And there are people today that are grown, that have children that were impacted because of Fred Whitfield and his vision to have that foundation achievement and unlimited. So that's who Fred Whitfield is someone who is selfless and he helps others.
And then, of course, you mentioned Carlton Thompson.
Okay. All right. Let me suck it up. All right. Carlton Thompson was my best friend in college. Carlton and I were teammates. Carlton and I had a lot of common values because he was from Duplin County, from Faison, which is probably about an hour and almost 2 hours, hour and a half maybe, from Campbell's campus. And he went to Newton Grove. Carlton was smart. He was tough. He was one of the best athletes that we had on our team. However, because Carlton grew up as I did, went to a small school, played our position. When he came here, he really, we were challenged playing. I said he was challenged because he was maybe 6'2" and was playing small forward, okay? And at that time, and of course I was challenged because I went to a small school and I played big guard, and here came to Campbell, I'm a point guard, okay? But Carlton was a wonderful person, and we were both business administration majors, and we spent a lot of weekends here at Campbell talking and fellowshipping together. And when we would graduate the same day together, we would both enter careers in textiles. I went to J.P. Stevens and he went to Milliken, and we would travel together. We've seen a lot of things. Michael Jordan's first game in Madison Square Garden, we saw that. The Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts, and we were able to see that. And we just did a lot together. And I'm in contact with his mom today. Carlton, unfortunately, he passed in 2002. And I really donate a lot of time, a lot of print in my book to Carlton, as you know. So, he had a special place in my heart. And his mom is still with us. And at my mom's funeral, his mom and his sister, Barbara Ann, attended. And after the funeral, his mom came up to me and she said, "Son, don't worry. You always have a mom. You always have a mom." So I send that woman, when I can, send her a Mother's Day card because my mom is no longer with me. I'll call her on Mother's Day and just have a conversation. Sometimes if I'm thinking of Carlton and I'm thinking of her, I'll just call and just say, "Hey, how you doing?" And so forth. And she's 84 years old and she's active in social media. So I get the opportunity to communicate with her on social media as well. But yeah, Carlton Thompson was a special person, and he meant a lot to his family, his community, and to Campbell University.
Hey Camel fans, this is Braxton Harris, and I've got one question for you. Are you ready for game day? Well, get your game face on because Campbell's 2025 football season is here. We're bringing the energy, the grit, and the passion, and we want you to be right there with us. But hey, game day is just the beginning. You want to make a real impact? then it's time to step up and join the Fighting Camel Club. Being a part of the Fighting Camel Club means you become the team behind the team, fueling scholarships, training, and academic success for not just our football athletes, but all 21 of our sports. When you join, you're not just a fan, you're a game changer. So what do you say, Camel Nation? Let's make a difference together. Join the Fighting Camel Club today and help us build champions on the field, in the classroom, and beyond.
Ernie, I graduated 1987. I'm acquainted with some people that I went to school with, and I have friends that I went to school with. But through the years and through my conversations with, especially with athletes, there seems to be a bond, especially with ones who were here for multiple years together and they stayed. Is it because of the time, the hardships, the things that you had to overcome? Is there why is that bond so strong between those teammates, do you think? I mean, in your instance, your case.
I say in my instance, in my era, is number one, Coach Roberts is the glue. Coach Roberts' family is an extension of him, and they continue to be the glue. And the common values that many of us had, most of us were small town country boys, small town and country boys from the South. So most of us had, were religious and had very spiritual people. Even though, hey, we like to have fun and all that kind of stuff, we're like everyone else. But I think that for us, what happened in 76, 77 is unique. It being unique in Campbell history, and and the up and down, ups and then down, and then back up season that we had, ending in our national championship runner-up season, that I think sealed it for us, and we will forever have that together. And I think I really feel for other classes, because it's not every day, and especially now in the NCAA Division I environment, it's not as easy for the athletes now to achieve what we achieved. And but I think that's one of the reasons why we were so close, and many of us continue to be close.
Our guest on Tales from the Creek is Ernest Gilchrist, class of 1980, basketball alumni, author, speaker, scholar, consultant. Ernie, that just segues right into, tell us a little bit about your professional journey.
Yes. When I left Campbell, I entered the management world in the textile arena. And at that particular time, textiles was big in North Carolina and the South. So if you graduated from Campbell in business administration, chances are you went into banking, and some of us did, or you went into textiles. And I wanted to go into banking. Okay, I really did. I saw myself going to work with a tie and all that kind of stuff. And but I started in textiles and with J.P. Stevens. So I spent several years in management with J.P. Stevens, traveling throughout the Southeast, and in that particular area, operations and industrial engineering. And I worked and lived in places like North Carolina, Alabama, South Carolina, Virginia, and I moved to Georgia and started and continued operations, but in food. I worked for some of the biggest food companies in the country, Kraft Foods, Borden, as in Daisy the cow. I worked for one of the largest contact lens and lens solutions companies in the world, Seba Vision, which is now Alcon.
Mhm.
So if a person wears contact lenses, they've heard of Alcon or Seba Vision. So so I worked in a lot of managerial roles, and I went back to school at our sister school, Mercer. It's ironic that I would end up getting my graduate degree from Campbell's sister school. It's like a big sister or a big brother, and got my international business degree and concentration in marketing from there. And from that opportunity, I was able to leverage my career and go into economic development, and where I would work in economic development for DeKalb County, Georgia, which is one of the largest counties in the Southeast, and for the Development Authority of DeKalb County, where I was able to help land deals, projects that were big and small, that people would see today. But I learned a lot. I traveled a lot, working in economic development for DeKalb County and other entities there. I also worked as a consultant in human resources as well. And now in my age that I am semi-retired. And one of the things I'm doing, I'm focusing on my passion. As I said earlier, I always wanted to be a writer.
Mhm.
So now, of course, I wrote my first book, Fusion of Cultures, The Spirit of Argyle America Revealed, a few years ago. But I am working on my the second edition right now,
Mhm.
and look forward to it launching in the late summer or early fall of this year. And in that second edition, there will be some new chapters, and I won't give you a heads up right now. It'll be a surprise, but it's going to be interesting. Some of the things I talk about are going to be very interesting. I'm going to expound on some other things. I will tell you one of the things I'm going to expound on in my second book. I'm going to expound on the Reverend John Campbell Sinclair. And Reverend John Campbell Sinclair was a Presbyterian minister who was brought here from Scotland, ultimately from Scotland to Canada and to North Carolina to teach the gospel and to preach it in Gaelic, because people in this area in the Cape Free region were Scottish Highlanders, but they didn't have a teacher or preacher in Scottish Gaelic. And this person is very important in history because he documented that, among other things, that he met black people that spoke the Scottish Gaelic as well as anyone in the Hebrides of Scotland. And in my research further, I have uncovered a lot of things that it's even more than that. He was someone that cared about people, and especially freed men, and his ministry. And he would go on to start not only preach at Barbecue Church here in Western Harnett County, but until the Civil War, but he would preach and start a church that of freed men, nearby at Love Grove AME Zion Church. And that was in 1868. And he was a fascinating person, especially for that era. So that's a sneak peek about one of the things I'm going to expand on in the book. So that's in the book. And I'm also writing a screenplay that's loosely based on my book and other sources. And that screenplay, hopefully sometime, I've started it, but hopefully sometime next year you'll be hearing more about the screenplay, and called Lessons.
Ernie, I'm curious, married, family, busy, work schedule in all your business adventures. Fusion of Cultures was published in 2011, 12, long in there. How'd you make the time to research, write, edit, all those good things?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, especially from a journalist. So it takes a lot of time to be able to bring things together. But I started on Fusion of Cultures in 2008, and I would get up in the mornings before work, and I would work on it, go to work. At lunch, I'd work some more, go to Subway, and read my notes, do some writing, whatever, in that little time I had. And then in the evenings, I'd spend time in the evenings, and then of course on weekends. And my wife and I had this little rule: if you're doing your research and working on your project, everything's okay, but 2 o'clock, okay, if you sleep in the other room, okay, because I don't want to be disturbed. So we had that little agreement that as long as I did that, I was okay. But yes, it took a lot of time, about 4 years, just bringing together on a part-time basis. And I would take a lot of trips up to North Carolina. My brother and I, especially my brother Herb, who ultimately played basketball at East Carolina, and he went to Western Harnett High School. He was East-West All-Star. And we, on my research trips home to my valley, quote unquote, to quote Paul Ring, then I would gather a lot of information. But yes, it took a lot of concentrated effort, and I appreciate my wife for putting up with me during that time, because anyone knows when you're working on something like that, then and you are married and you have family, that there is sacrifice that not only you're making, but you're sacrificing, other people are sacrificing and supporting you. So yes.
Tell us a little bit about your family.
My family, I grew up in a family of 11 kids, and my mom and dad were wonderful people. And we grew up, as I said earlier, I grew up in Johnsonville Township and attended Johnsonville A.M. Zion Church all my life. So my father and mom, they were smart people, but they weren't like college educated people, but they were people who wanted to make sure that their kids were educated. And I spent a lot of time in church. My father was a trustee of Johnsonville A.M. Zion Church for 50 years. I spent a lot of time in Sunday school, Bible study, and all of that. So I have that background through my parents in the church, and I think that's been very instrumental to me spiritually in my life. And my siblings, I mostly very educated. I have 2 sisters that have doctorate degrees in English, and that's probably why I didn't want to major in English, even though I wanted to be a journalist, because they already were English professors. So, but they have been successful in their careers, and I've got other siblings who have done very well in their career. We're very close to the day. We get together for family reunions on a regular basis, and large portion of my family now lives in the Atlanta area. So when we get together, we really get together a lot in Georgia, even though I grew up here.
And how about your immediate family now, your wife and kids?
My immediate family, thanks for asking. My wife's name is Cynthia, spelled Synetha. And I told you I worked in Alabama, right? Well, when I left Campbell, my first job was in Montgomery, Alabama. And I didn't think that I would end up going down there and getting a wife. I mostly went down there to start my career working, thinking that I would ultimately end up in North Carolina, because that particular company had a division that I was in that had North Carolina plants. However, I met Cynthia down there, and we soon hit it off. We got married, and she is a wonderful person. She's a physical therapist, and she loves what she does. She loves people, and she loves positive health, positive outcomes, and getting them well, and working with the geriatric population. And because she's in healthcare, our children went that direction. My son is Darius. He is a occupational therapy assistant. Went to Georgia State University and exercise science, and then he went on and got his COTA degree, and he lives in the East Bay, Antioch, California. That's east of Oakland, east in the San Francisco Bay Area. And he's a great kid. I mean, he's grown now, of course. But my daughter, Tamara, she's a physician assistant. And again, this healthcare medical taken under my wife. But my daughter, Tamara, even though she is in the medical area, she went to Emory in Georgia State. She has the entrepreneurial interest that I have as well. So at least she didn't major in business, but she has that as well. That passion. But they're doing well. My daughter Tamara got married last year, so my family is growing a little bit, and that's interesting.
Throughout your book, you refer to literature and music. Paul Green, Marvin Gaye, Peter Tosh, Zora Neale Hurston, Don McLean to Dizzy Gillespie, and a myriad of musical genres from gospel to rock and roll, R&B to disco and jazz. Ernie, when did your love of literature and music start, and how have those arts influenced your life?
Yes, they started when I was a kid, because when I was growing up, I was always involved in something. I was involved in plays at school, and even though I was also an athlete, I was in drama in high school and so forth. So that really helped to form my musical interest. I was in choir and things like that. And then because I was in the church, then it developed that aspect of me too, because of being in the in church. But yes, culture is a part. That's what culture is being able to. What were you doing in 1987, and what songs do you remember when you walked this campus, Stan, that you remember today as if it's yesterday? Okay.
Well, my wife and I, our first official date was an REM concert. So the college radio of the 1980s was huge for us. The album, every song from Fables of the Reconstruction by REM, that's on
Yeah.
what we call our soundtrack.
Yeah.
And we still, we started taking our kids to concerts when they were very small.
Yeah.
Most recently, the four of us got together. Of course, ours are grown, and you know how hard it is to get all four together at the same time. But a year ago or so, we all went to see Bruce Springsteen together.
Awesome.
And so yes, I relate to those things, and I could ask Claudia, my wife, just about any song from the 70s or early 80s or late 60s. I said, "Where are you?" And she associates a song or a tune with a place where she might be, whether she's on the river, or at the beach, around doing housework, because they used to stack 45 singles on the record player on Saturday mornings and clean the house, and then flip them over and play the other side.
Yeah.
So, I understand that from you.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, if I may. Your favorite author? Do you have one?
I would say author slash playwright is I'm gonna go back to Paul Green. Okay, because Paul, again, I wrote a book about a chapter about Paul Green. That should be required reading for people. And of course, many people know Paul Green for the Lost Colony and in the Outer Banks, and I think Manteo. But Paul Green also won a Pulitzer Prize for In Abraham's Bosom in 1926, and it was about a black family in Harnett County. People don't know that. Okay, but he was an innovator in terms of his writing and his thinking. So I will kind of modify mine to say he's my favorite. And of course, you know what? It's interesting that Paul Green, I'm one of the, if I could take some privilege, that Paul Green's life would intersect with so many people in American history. You mentioned Zora Neale Hurston, who used to live in North Carolina for a time, and she and Paul Green would become pretty close professionally, and she would go to his house in Chapel Hill. And of course, Zora Neale Hurston wrote Arms Too Short to Box with God. And he would teach folk history to her, and she was, in her career. And so I can imagine that scene there. But yeah, you forgot to mention like Taylor, Carolina on My Mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, just to mention a few. And you know what? When you are in a place like Bush Creek, I think what I have found and what many others have found is that because it is still a special place that where the campus is the community, and it's quiet, can be quiet and serene, and you can focus, and music becomes very important to you in terms of the overall scheme of things. And that's why I think in my book, I relate music a lot to the period.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the Campbell University story. But yeah, so I'm glad you appreciated that. But yes, music is very important.
Ernie, tell me how you became involved with this PBS documentary, Voices Over the Water.
I would say that, well, I say that because I went to Campbell University, right? But in writing the book, I met online at 2:00 in the morning a professor named Dr. Michael Newton. He's a Celtic scholar, or like CLTIC, and he's one of the renowned Scottish Gaelic experts in the country. He was at the University of North Carolina at that time. So we connected, and I read, several of his books and used his research in my book. And he invited me to Nova Scotia to speak at the first annual Celts in the Americas conference. And of course, I had to pay my own way. It was like a vacation going up to Antigonish. People anglicize it and they say Antigonish, but it's in Nova Scotia. And that was really, really great. So we established a relationship from that point on. Well, in 2019, the producers, Guy Perotta and Jane Ferguson, were in Scotland filming Voices Over the Water. And Michael Newton is an integral part of Voices Over the Water. Of course, by the way, Michael is a consultant to the series called The Outlander.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Michael says, hey, Guy and Jane, you need to contact this guy named Ernest in Atlanta. He wrote this book. Okay. Well, I understand they read the book and they enjoyed it. They really were fascinated about what they read. And next thing you know, they contacted me and asked me if I wanted to be in the documentary, flew me to New York, and we filmed, and the rest is history.
Ernie, you've mentioned repeatedly how important Campbell and your college experience was to your life. What advice would you give to a college student, whether they're just a general student or a student athlete? What advice would you give them?
A Campbell student now?
Yes.
Yes. I would say that utilize your time here well, because it won't last forever. Get to know other people. You can't get to know everybody in a 4 or 5 year period of time, but get to know other people. because those relationships that you develop after you leave Campbell can be very, very instrumental in your life. Excuse me. I would tell them to get to know the professors, have conversations. They make their office hours available to them. Go schedule some time to them, not just to see how you can improve on the next test, but to get to know them better, because the professors, many of them, they do other things besides just teach. They are involved. Before they came to Campbell, they are involved in different things, different projects. Many of them have written books and whatever, and you can learn so much. As I did, my relationship that I had with Dr. Shelby Stevenson, I didn't realize that was how impactful that was going to be for me years later. So that's what I would advise them to do, is to work hard, enjoy their campus experience, be curious, be intellectually curious, and to be able to go to things on campus that you wouldn't think that would ordinarily interest you, you know, and just pick something and join something if you have the opportunity to, and to meet new people that you might not necessarily meet, and so that you can grow culturally, and then you can see where those relationships, you can see where they form many years later, but basically where you can grow. Because now when I look back, I'm very blessed because I was in sports. Because I was in sports, a lot of people knew me. But what people might not know about me is that I also was in student government, and I was the vice president of my senior class. And now a lot of that had to do with the fact that they knew Ernie because Ernie was on the basketball team, and that I was a business administration major, and business, I think, was the business that had the largest number of students. So I got a chance to really learn about Campbell, and really engage with a lot of people because I was active.
Finally, Ernie, can you put into words for us just how much Campbell University and this community have impacted your life?
Campbell has been very, very special in my life, not only having just graduated from Campbell, but just the value, just what I learned at Campbell. I'm going to just tell you that I didn't realize what was then called CEP. I think it was or chapel, how that would impact my life, and how that would impact my children's lives, and how that would impact other people in my lives. Because, when you have that, I think it's called something else now, but I tell the story in my book about the Scottish man that came one day. And, and at that time, and probably still now, you show up a certain number of days a week, someone in the balcony, they check off and see if you're in your chair. So a lot of times it's kind of routine. Okay. It's another day, someone's going to come here, and they're going to, we're going to be forced to listen because we kind of sit there. But one day the Scottish man came, and I didn't know what to expect, but I listened, and this Scottish man said nothing else I remember, but he said, I am, I can, and I will. I am, I can, and I will. That has been pivotal to me in my life, that positive affirmation that this man who remain nameless because I don't remember his name. Okay. I wish I did. But what he left with me that day, I don't know what he left with other people that day, but with me, when I speak to my daughter and my son, I say, I am, and they finish, I can and I will. And they pass that on to other people and their friends. So that just an example of what Campbell means to me, and one aspect of Campbell that I would as a student, I would not have known, because we don't have the benefit when you're 20 years old to be able to of hindsight, to know what some aspect of Campbell life means. And that's just one aspect of Campbell life. And but yes, Campbell, the institution, the people, Dr. Wiggins, and I was blessed to know Dr. Wiggins, in terms of that time. I know people here, you see the names on the buildings, but during my era, I was able to know Dr. Burkott. Okay. I could see Dr. Burkott walking across the campus, and his wife would be with him. I would see, of course, Dr. Wiggins, at the ball games or something like that. These people, or Mrs. King, they're institutions now. Many of them have gone on, but as you know, you had the pleasure as well of many of these people were real to you because we were blessed to know them. So that's what Campbell really means to me.
I'm Stan Cole, and our guest today on Tales from the Creek has been Ernest Gilchrist. Thank you, Ernie, for sharing your Tales from the Creek.
Thank you. My pleasure.